This is Tap in, Tap Out. Welcome or welcome back. I am your host, Alex. In this podcast, we tap into discussions around mental wellness, spirituality, and culture, and tap out of the patterns that no longer serve us. Amen. How y'all doing? That almost tripped me up. I don't know why. When I read it every single week. Anyway, I hope y'all doing okay. I am personally doing really good this week. I don't want to jinx it, but I feel like I'm on the come up, okay? Like mentally, spiritually, I am feeling good this week. I had really good quality time with some friends this weekend, and I'm kind of more on top of my work lately, and so I've just been feeling better. My sleep schedule is still sucks, I will say that. But besides sleeping, I've actually been doing really good. This week we don't have any questions for the inbox, but if you do have questions, you can send them into heartofshema@gmail.com or DM my personal page at JustAlexToday on Instagram or Twitter. Usually on Thursdays or Fridays, I try to post a Q&A thing on my story. So if you want to use that time to send your questions in, you can. Last episode we talked to Chris from Reawakening Love about journaling, and so we talked about the ins and outs of journaling. If you're someone who has struggled with what to journal or just how to get into it, it was a really good foundational conversation, and so I encourage you to go back and listen if you haven't already. But yeah, it was really cool, and I feel like for people who have kind of been on the fence about just where to start and how to build a framework around your practices, it was super helpful, even for me. So I really encourage you to go listen to that. This week we are playing another round of We're Not Really Strangers. This time I asked my past coworker, found friend, Nick, to join me. We met. We talk about it in the interview, but we met at a job and ended up staying friends after the job. But yeah, why I think Nick would be a good guest and why he was a good guest is that he's atypical to the usual kinds of people I keep around me, and I think naturally as people we tend to gravitate towards our people, and so it's rare that I'm around people that I don't necessarily consider myself similar to, or I don't know, but weirdly enough, even though we're not similar in a couple ways, we still manage to vibe with each other. And Nick is very you'll hear it in the interview, but Nick is very heady and like he thinks a lot about a lot of things, and so there is a part of me I think that is very, very introspective and analytical, and I don't really get to show a lot of that side of myself in my relationships usually because I don't want to like bore people. But Nick is like, he lives there, like he lives in that headspace, very philosophical, very, I don't know, just he's just there up in the sky thinking about everything. And so I was very interested to ask him to come on to see what we would have done if we played this game together. I played this game before with Hanifa in episode 3. Check that out. But yeah, me and him tackle the game and talk about our perception of each other and how that's changed over the years. And also, it was just really packed with a lot of good little nuggets. So yeah, I'm not gonna delay it. So without further ado, we're gonna go to the tap in with Nick. Okay, it is time for the tap in, and I'm here with someone. I'm gonna let him introduce himself because I don't really know how to introduce him, honestly. It's Nick. His name is Nick. Hi, Nick.
Hey Alex, thank you for having me. So just quick introduction. Like you were, so I know Alex because we were RAs,
Yes.
and we couldn't be any more different. But that's what we attracted each other through that difference. And not only that, just how well educated in conversations were, and just the tonality of each conversation was just so light. It was just super nice to have very differing viewpoints, but like a very easy way to discuss things. So that's how I know Alex, and that's how we became friends in that regard. And then I'm a grad student right now at UT as well. So
Yeah. Yeah. Initially, I was like not expecting to connect with you. We've talked about this before, but
Yeah, no, it's weird. It could have been any more different. It was like there's people on the staff that I was like, yeah, there's no way me and you can have a conversation
Mhm.
without it getting heated. But you and I, we talked about everything under the sun, literally everything,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
the conversation never boiled up past 11. It was already like right there at one or
Mhm.
two.
Yeah, and I think something that I wanted to bring to the podcast was just this idea of part of growing and part of having a mindset of like elevating yourself is being able to hold space for people who might not hold the same opinions as you or
Mm,
tackle the same problems the way you do. I think we have different like value structures that drive how we do our day to day. And so I think that like being able to have a baseline level of respect is like really important. I don't think a lot of people actually do that, you know.
oh yeah,
um, so in thinking about, the guests to invite specifically to play this game that I played before, but I was like, oh, I think Nick would be cool to play this with because we actually don't always land in the same place all the time and
yeah,
stuff, but we also have a lot of similarities in how we think about the world and approach wise. So I was really fascinated to play this on a psychological level, but also just on a
yeah,
friend
exactly.
level. Um, cool. So this week we are playing a game called We're Not Really Strangers. It was developed by someone named Korean.
Hmm.
Essentially, it's a get to know you type game, but it's designed in a way that is really specific to the brand of this game. So it's really cool.
Yes.
So I'm gonna break it down really quick, and then we're gonna jump in. And we're doing like a condensed version of it. Usually, it's like much longer and much more in depth, but we're just gonna take it from a place that would be fine for a podcast length episode. So
Exactly. We don't want to lecture.
exactly. So
Yeah.
basically the game is broken into three different levels. So level one is perception. So
Hmm.
these are questions that will help us to gain perspective on what first impressions we've had of each other. And actually before we move on, I wanted to ask you, because we've talked about this before. Um, what's your relationship to like how people perceive you and like how has that changed over the years?
Good. That's a generous question. Yeah, it's always negative. I
Mm.
think the first impression when people with me is it's always negative for whatever reason, and that's been since I can remember.
Mhm.
Being a and like youth sports things like that. Like my personality just dictates or just kind of draws the energy of I don't like this person like
Mm.
automatically. So my perception of other people and their first impression of me has always been negative. And then
Mm.
gradually, as we get to know each other, their tune changes, and they're like, you know what? I judged you a little too quick, and
Harshly,
I was just
yeah.
yeah, harshly for sure, but quick, and they just kind of sent me off to the side and denoted me as that one thing already.
Mm.
Um, so my perception has always been that like it's always been a negative first impression. And I like my biggest thing with people is I have a hard time not liking people. Like I enjoy everyone. Like I really do.
Really?
I very much enjoy people. Like it's odd. Like I tell people in my class all the time. Like the reason I want to be in sales, it's more about like the people than anything to me. I
Mm.
thoroughly enjoy being around people. Like it's one of my favorite things. That's why I try to bridge gaps between a lot of different areas of
Mm.
people and what they like to talk about because it's if I can make them feel comfortable in my presence, then that's 75% of our conversation is wrapped around them. So it's like a blanket. I'm like, here's your blanket about yourself, and let's talk
Mm.
about you. So
That's interesting. Yeah, I think for me it's I think in high school, probably like under high school, people had negative impressions of me, but it was more about like it was more in like a bullying way, it wasn't like a level comparison. It was like you are like lesser than. And so in terms of friends that I
but
had,
yeah,
what are you gonna say?
I would say you international though. You're an international student,
Yes.
so you
Yeah.
went to school in the Bahamas, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see the dynamic between like a US based high school education system
Mm.
versus a Bahamian Bahamian?
No,
Bahamian?
you said it right the first time. I'm actually
Bahamian,
surprised.
yeah.
Yes.
Bahamian education system and how your culture plays out in it. Because I mean, arguably, I don't know if I'm being tone deaf here, but I would say that the US culturally is a progressive. Like, we'd like to think that we're progressive
Mm-hmm.
in a high school system, whatever. It's more
Mm.
of, but there's bullying. Don't get me wrong. Like, that's
Yeah,
not like
yeah.
there's always going to be bullying and stuff like that. But I'm just curious to see the dichotomy between the two. If you notice anything, you're in college now, so it's kind of hard. But
Yeah,
if you could like transport yourself back in time.
yeah. I feel like I feel like the boxes are tighter, you know, and specifically it's a majority black country, and so I think that when you have this like microcosm of black men specifically and like black women, like there's this the the stereotypes or the cultural bars we have to meet are kind of more clear cut than like
Yeah.
somebody who maybe in the US in a mixed school just happened to just happening to have to conform to their group of friends who are black. Whereas like I'm in a school that's like built on the ideas of what a black man, a black woman should be. And there are different people
Mhm.
at my school who were like of different races and stuff, and they were all the minorities, you know? And so I feel
Mhm.
like it was definitely like higher levels of like toxic masculinity and like if you didn't meet certain
Mhm.
criteria. I would notice too, like if you weren't hitting certain markers in like puberty in time, like you
Mhm.
would get picked on, like, and that's happened to me, whereas my voice wasn't in a trajectory that was like, I guess, like approved of, you know, and I couldn't control that. And so I was
Yeah.
constantly in turmoil because I was like, I can't control how my voice is or isn't
Yeah.
changing when it quote
Mhm.
unquote needs to, you know? And I always felt like things needed to happen at certain stages and they weren't happening for me. And so that's where this like almost classist kind of elitist attitude came from people that found a power in telling you how far you weren't there yet, you know, in
Yeah.
certain areas of your life. So I feel like in those ways, American schools do have this veil of being a little more progressive, a little more like I don't know, like the kids have a little more room to
Mhm.
breathe, I feel like, and bullying is still a thing, of course, but I feel like back home is a little bit more it's just a little harder because we were
Mhm.
focused on the nuances of a specific people group, and the
Mhm.
nuances were just like really concentrated and like and loud. I don't know if that answers your
Yeah.
question.
No, that's absolutely I was gonna say, I wrote a note here. So the more homogeneous the group, the more likely the cultural foundations or underpinnings of your gender and your cultural differences start to protrude a lot more.
Mm.
Um, so that I always found that really interesting with undeveloped or whatever the
Yes.
case is. Those countries tend to be a little more strict in the guidelines of what it is to be and your gender, like
Mhm.
social classes and things like that. So, which I find it very interesting. But just to not push back, but to bring it onto like the cultural side of the United States, like it's funny because like the bullying that happened in the high school system was more around like intellectual discourse. So
Mm.
it would be along the lines of not being progressive enough, honestly, is like the best way to put it.
Yeah.
So that was interesting about it. And I remember thinking about in high school that I was like kind of scared to say some stuff if I didn't agree with it because of that. And I was like, I don't want to say this because I don't want people to
Oh.
because I went to a predominantly white school,
Mhm.
which is weird to have a bunch of I'm not saying like white people talk about stuff, but I come from a pretty culturally diverse background. Like my mom's Cuban, my dad's Greek. So
Mhm.
and they're both immigrants. And I grew up speaking Spanish and things like that. So my palette of like culture was a lot more defined or developed than theirs. And they would have all these weird platitudinal response towards like cultural issues or social issues about people who weren't them.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's weird.
Yes.
It's like and I thought this was like so odd. I'm like, how are we talking about like Hispanic people when I'm the
Like,
only
where
one
are
in here?
they? Yeah.
And I haven't said a single thing. Like I haven't said a word about it, you
Mm.
know?
Yeah, yeah.
So that was odd. But yeah, anyway, good question.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I feel like my perceptions have definitely I've done a better job of being able to separate them from who I believe I am, you know. But
Yeah.
I think as people, I don't get too much into this, but I think as people we need to start off like modeling and so like and taking in observations from people. And I think in a way, when we were born and start growing up, like people kind of tell us who we need to be, and we have to figure out what parts of those we want to take with us, what parts you want to not
Hmm.
we want to reject, you know.
Absolutely.
So that's level one, perception. I just want to ask you that because I feel like you had good thoughts on perception. But level two is connection. So just more of the like rarely asked questions in life and in hopes to like connect on a deeper level. And then level three is reflection. So just reflecting on your game experience. Like
Hmm.
I said, a much more condensed version. Usually I think you have to ask like 15 sets of questions like
Oh
from each
wow.
level, but we're not going to do that today.
I'd be very
So
bad at that.
I know. I think
I'd be just
it's definitely like a session. Like if you're gonna play this game with a friend, but
yeah.
instead, what we're gonna do is we're going to ask. So we'll each have two questions to ask each other, basically. So four questions for
Gotcha.
each round total. Now, the thing with perception, I'm just gonna ask them because I have the deck in my hand. So I'm just gonna shuffle and then pull these questions and start.
Mhm.
So this one is like for you to answer about me.
Okay, cool.
Do you think I'm usually early, on time, or late to events? And explain.
All the events that had a time constraint, you were on time and early to. For instance,
Mm.
our RA meetings, you were on time or
Mm-hmm.
mostly early. You were there before me on most occasions. And that's for most of the meetings as well. So I would say you're a pretty punctual person, and you respect people's time. I think it comes from a point. I think it comes from a place of morality and respect, instead of
Wow.
a place of actual, um, like, 'cause I think people like the clout that gets associated with being on time, being early. There's some weird fixation on that nowadays. It's like,
Mm.
wow, this person's so switched on. They're here on time or early. It's like, well, or they just care about your time.
I
So
see.
that's what I got from you, is that you were on time. You were a good team player, and that's like facilitating the whole tone of what our conversation would be like as a group, RA group.
Mm-hmm.
It's just better if people are on time, because it
Yeah.
I view it as like, if you don't respect the actual game or the idea of what we're doing, then you wouldn't be on time, because then that negates the whole process of what we're doing here. If
Mm.
that's like a little deeper than what it is, because basically, if you're not respecting the constraints of time for this certain specific thing that we're doing, then you don't respect this certain specific thing that we're doing. So yeah,
Mm.
you're an on time person, and even I think earlier on occasion as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I'm definitely like an on-time person.
Yeah.
There was a time that oh, it's funny because I'm taking a class right now on prejudice and how a part of the class is talking about how stereotypes of certain people groups are can be prescriptive. So
Hmm.
certain minorities can feel the need to kind of overcompensate for things that exist about them, you know? And so something
Absolutely.
that always comes to mind for that for me is being on CP time, you know, and how like
Hmm.
Black people are known to be late. And so there was a time like sophomore year where I told myself that I had to be 15 minutes early to every class
Hmm.
because I don't need people to like I don't want to add to the stigma, you know. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
I would be there 15 minutes and no one would care. Like, and I was like,
Yeah,
you know
no,
what? I'm gonna just always be on time because is no one's
yeah.
watching me, no one cares. I'm not gonna be ending the stigma of Black people by doing this, you
Mhm.
know. But it's funny how we'll like move around based on what we think people perceive about us, you know, or even the people
Oh,
that
no,
we
it's
represent, you know.
absolutely. Hispanic people are always late. Like,
Mm.
they're loud, obnoxious, and they're late. It's like the trifecta of what it is to be a bad guest. And, I mean, socially, I'm usually late to things too, but that's more of like it's not a big grievance, but when it's professional, you gotta respect the whole I think you have to respect the idea of what we're trying to do here as an
Mm.
organization.
This is your question that I have to answer about you. Do you seem like a coffee or tea person, sweetened or unsweetened? I think honestly, you're like a black coffee kind of person. Like you don't need any
Yo,
sugar, you don't
100
need anything. You're like, just give me the
yo, you're
black
right.
coffee.
I drink black coffee every morning with maybe half a teaspoon of sugar. Sometimes if I feel extra, sadistic, I won't put any sugar in it, and I'll just drink it black.
I could see that, and you know why? I feel like you give off very like minimalist vibes. you're like even when in your old room, you didn't have a lot of things hanging up or like a lot of furniture or like extra like tapestries or like cute stuff. You know,
Nothing.
like you only had what you needed, and so I feel like you definitely do drink. I feel like you would drink coffee, and so I feel like it just be black coffee.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because you're 100% right. I definitely do drink black coffee every morning.
Okay, this is your question to me.
Alrighty.
What do you think I'm most likely to splurge on?
Oh man,
I don't know what my answer is for this.
most likely to splurge on. Is there any sort of like categories I can? Is it just anything?
Anything.
Okay. Um. Well, I have like two responses for that. So the
Okay.
first one, I think it's so just knowing you personally and knowing how you are with people. I think you would be a very, very good gift giver. I feel like
Oh.
you put a lot of emphasis on giving gifts, and I think you would splurge on like individuals, and you would remember things about what they like or and like small things but important things.
Hmm.
So I think you'd splurge on specific gifts or things for people, and then for yourself, I want to think it's uh I think you care about yourself and like that self-care type of manner in a good way.
Hmm.
So anything that has to do with like self-reflection, so journals, books, maybe even some skincare stuff, some sweets.
Yes. Wow.
I
You're
I
not
think it's
wrong.
yeah, no, I think it's that if you're gonna splurge, it's gonna be on stuff that makes you feel that will bring you back to center. So like I don't know,
Yes.
chocolate. I feel like you like chocolate
I
or
do like
ice cream
chocolate.
or something. So yeah, I think you would just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna double down on the stuff that makes me feel good.
It's funny because last week we were talking about how we say like we're gonna treat ourselves as like a throwaway for like just spending money carelessly.
Yeah,
So I definitely have a problem with that. So you definitely got that right.
yeah.
This is my question about you. So what about you is most strange or unfamiliar to me? I feel like the first thing that comes to mind is your like discipline as a person. I was thinking about this actually when I was planning this interview, but I were trying to remember like things that we talked about and stuff. But I just remember even
Mhm.
but things that we didn't talk about. But you just went to the gym like every single day. You like were reading books every single day. Like you had like a very disciplined routine. And as someone who over time has become a lot more like vibey, and like I try to be more fluid in the moment, like what feels good right now, I don't feel like you're that
Mhm.
kind of person. I feel like you're very like, what do I need to do today? It's gonna get done, and
Oh yeah.
that discipline is like unfamiliar to me because I don't know, like, and you look forward to that. That's the difference. Like you look forward to being disciplined, whereas for me, I'm like, it's a chore, But that's
Yeah.
again, that's my perception of you. I don't know if that's actually true.
No, I would say you're accurate. And it's definitely like a painful process. Like I don't want people to get confused with the fact like, yeah, discipline is usually people who are disciplined, they enjoy it, but they enjoy the accoutrements that's associated with it, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the process. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're a disciplined person, you understand how hard it is to get into that mode. Like you know you don't like it.
I think we finished level one. We're
Gotcha.
gonna move on to level two. These ones throw me for a loop sometimes. I'm kind of nervous.
You'll be all
Um,
right.
but these ones are more, yeah, like direct, I guess.
Okay,
Um,
cool.
what's been the best compliment that a stranger has ever given you?
The best compliment that a stranger's like someone that I don't know, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So one of my classmates, I remember 2 weeks ago. He's a stranger because I don't really know him that well,
Mm-hmm.
but he's in my class, and we were having a conversation in class, and we were just talking. And midway through it, he stops and he says, I think you're the most charismatic person I know that I've ever met." And I just sat there. I was like, "Oh, thanks." I was so happy. I was like, "That's such a good like that made me so happy.
Mm.
Thank you."
Oh, this is big. My question is, what lesson took you the longest to unlearn?
Oh, go ahead. Hey,
um,
I mean, which one do you want to unbox first? I mean,
I
we got a couple that you
know.
could talk about here.
I'm actually gonna tie it into something we already touched on, but I think
Okay.
only recently have I been able to like begin to like significantly unlearn this idea that my my success in life is tied to other people's perception of like when that happens, you know? And like,
When your success happens?
yes, because I
Okay.
was so growing up, I've said this maybe before on the podcast, but growing up, I didn't know this was a harmful thing, but most of my family, most of my relatives, any family friends, like always
Mhm.
affirm me through what I was going to do in the future. Like, you're gonna be a great doctor, you're gonna be a great lawyer, you're gonna be a great rich person or whatever. You're gonna make a lot of money. And you're so
Yeah.
smart, but you're gonna be so successful. Like you have to be because you're so smart. And in the moment, it felt super like affirming that like I haven't even done anything yet, and people already see the world in me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I
Yeah.
began to realize that when my realities and even how I felt internally weren't matching with that future affirmation, like it really took a
Mhm.
toll on me because I always felt like I wasn't doing enough and that I wasn't meeting the mark because
Mhm.
I was never doctor ready to this day.
Yeah.
And people always saw more in me than I saw in myself. And I always thought that was my fault, you know, like because why is it that everybody else thinks I'm amazing, but I think I
Mhm.
suck, you know? And it wasn't until
Mhm.
I realized that the source of my motivation cannot be in someone else's idea of who I am, you know?
Which
And
is hard to break away
and
from.
even it, and especially when they're good things, you know, because it's one thing to be
Yeah.
like, oh, you're gonna go to jail one day, or you're not gonna make it, because people
Yeah.
can be like, oh, after you, like I'm gonna do my thing, but we don't
Mhm.
talk often enough about getting that good encouragement that seems benevolent, but actually is
Mhm.
coded in a sense of idealism, or I don't know, like it's just it's kind of
I think
false.
manipulation. I would say
Yes, yes,
manipulation.
yes, yes.
It's and I have it written down, and I just want to see what you say. Like just when I tell you this phrase, I call it toxic positivity.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. I think that's definitely where it's coming
Yeah,
from. Yeah.
it's toxic positivity. It's like those are objectively those are all good things that your parents, friends, family are telling you. But on the inside, you're like, yeah, but can I get there first? Can I do something that's associated with it? Can I even like talk about it? Can we talk about this?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you like I feel like, and just to take our gender away for a second,
Mm-hmm.
girls have a hard time with that. Oh,
Mm.
you're gonna be so pretty. You know, it's so pretty. Like so many guys are gonna like you. You're gonna break so many guys' heart. Like at a young age, they're telling these girls, and then
Yes.
they grow up and they're poor thing. This girl's like, I haven't spoken to a guy in
Mm.
like 2 years.
Yeah, yeah,
And I feel
yeah.
like with girls, their whole identity sometimes can be wrapped in their physical appearance to
Mm.
literally a small section of like males too.
Yeah, yeah.
So, so that toxic positivity is it's that's definitely something that our generation, being Gen Zs,
Yes.
we're not tone deaf to. Like we hear it and we're like, listen, hey, getting all A's is good, but sometimes I'm gonna get a B or a C, and you
Yeah,
guys have to
and
be okay with it.
that would take a toll on me because I wasn't ever
Trust
like a
me, yeah.
bad student, but I wasn't the student that
Mhm.
was gonna be the best doctor, you know? So I always felt this
Mhm.
disconnect from who people told me I was or was gonna become, you know?
Mhm.
But thank God for my therapist who has worked with me.
But I have a question for you, and I've been trying to piece
Yes.
this thought out together in my head for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's the toxic positivity realm, and then there's the realm, or there's the sphere of, I think, discourse nowadays where it's talking about, oh, what you're doing is great, you know, and then you're good where you are, don't move too fast, blah blah blah. And then there's some people who hear that, they're like, well, I don't feel good with where I'm at right now, like this is not where I need
Mm.
to be. So it goes both ways. You have that element that you just described, and then you have the other element where people like, maybe a kick in the ass would be nice,
Mm.
you know. So my what I was getting at was that there's the ideal of a student, then there's you, and then maybe playing in like the nuanced realm, like elevates you like 7%,
Mm.
2%, even like 0.5%. Like you're getting a little better. Like
Mm-hmm.
aiming up is better than just aiming where you are or just hanging out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that's how I view it. I know it sounds kind of like, oh, that could lead to a very slippery slope of negative emotion, which it really can, like
Mm-hmm.
the hustle culture and things like that. But at the same time, it's you need something to aim at, because if you don't, you're just going to be in that constant almost self-pitying in a way.
Yeah, just kind of like a maintenance thing,
Yeah,
not
like in
like
a
a
like
elevation. Yeah.
exactly. So that I feel like that's where I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to bridge the gap between that. Like I
I
said, we
see. I don't know
both
if this
come.
is yeah, I don't know if this is helpful, but what comes to mind is like maybe not related, but internalizing or figuring out whether your motivations are intrinsic or extrinsic in nature, you know?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Because I mean, for
Absolutely.
those that don't know, intrinsic motivation are things that you like, core values that you have that are driving what you do. Whether that is you shooting up or shooting
Hmm.
like, I don't know, parallel to you or whatever, you know?
Yeah,
Whereas and extrinsic is like, for example, like going to church because you want to go versus going to church because your mom told you you have to go. Like extrinsic is
exactly.
kind of like an outside motivation. And so I think that when we talk about climbing up the ladder or that hustle culture, like it's much harder for it to be authentic, but also like just being disciplined in that if it's an extrinsic motivation of like,
Hmm.
my dad told me it would be good to get in this career. You know, or like I
Hmm.
read an article and they said that they make the best money versus like, I think I want to do this because like I think
Hmm.
my skill set work best for this field, you know? So
Hmm.
I think that probably ties into
Yeah,
it too.
I think people need to be careful with that as well. I'm doing a research paper in my economics class.
Mhm.
It's a multivariate analysis on the wage gap between men and women.
Interesting.
So the three components I'm utilizing to compare to compare the facets or the factors of why men get paid more than women are the Big Five personality model, work-life preferences, and the industries that are chosen.
Mm.
So socially, and I believe this a little bit, it's going against some research. Socially, I do feel girls are pushed out of the higher earning potential roles because of how they were brought up a little bit. I personally feel that because I've
Mhm.
seen it with my own sister. I'm a triplet, by the way, so I'm a pretty good sample to
You're a
use because my
triplet?
mom.
What do
Yeah,
you
I'm a
mean?
triplet.
Nick, you mean like you have
I have
like you're like,
two others.
what do you mean like a triplet? I'm
Like
sorry.
I have two siblings who are the same age as I am.
You all came out at the same time.
Yep, I'm the youngest by
Nick,
2 minutes.
why didn't I know this? I knew you have two
You didn't?
siblings. I didn't know you were a
Triplet.
triplet.
Yeah, that I'm a triplet. I'm a triplet.
No, I thought you were the oldest. I'll be honest.
Mm-mm. No, I'm the youngest.
I thought your sister was like the youngest, and then your brother was like right below you, and then you're like
Mm-mm.
the oldest.
No, I'm the youngest.
Wow. I was This is an irrelevant tangent, but I didn't
Yeah,
know
right?
that.
Weird. Yeah.
What were you saying?
Oh no, I'm just saying about the multivariate analysis about like the
Yes,
wage
the
gap.
different yes, the different
It's
factors.
interesting. There's because I don't think they put enough emphasis on the social factors, and the only reason
Mm,
they don't, as a researcher, it's really hard to measure
yes.
social factors because
Mhm.
there's no data you can pinpoint.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm gonna move on. I'm trying to find a question. This is your question. Have you changed your mind about anything recently?
Yes,
I'm sure you
dude.
have. I feel like you change your mind
Yeah, I
every.
changed mine a lot. I changed my mind a lot. I guess the best way to, yeah. So I have changed my mind a lot about a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pick one thing that's pretty substantial. Traditionally, I was always a conservative when it came to politics, more fiscally than socially.
Okay.
So what that means is that like I like the monetary policies that the conservative right Republicans they choose over the conservative left. Um, but now, as I did more research and I've looked into both sides, and I've obviously became a little more versed on the uh, culture and the companies that are addressing most of our GDP. I'm
Mhm.
I'm democratic in that sense. Like I would say more of my policies and my underpinnings are associated with like democratic policies and legislators.
This is random, but have you ever struggled with like your parents in terms of, I don't know what your parents believe at all, but I'm just asking like
Hmm.
if it has there ever been some like dissonance with that, with like what you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So my dad's always been socially left, coming from Australia.
Really?
He's very liberal in his ideas socially. In a fiscal manner, he's a little more conservative or moderate. My mom is extremely right leaning though. She's very
Mm,
into culture, tradition, um, the basically all the moral foundations of what it is to be a right leaning individual. And that's where me and her butt heads a lot on as well.
mm,
So we butt heads, but I come with a lot of research and
the facts.
uh, a lot of powerful dictum
Arguments.
as well.
I
Yeah,
see.
exactly. But yeah, I do. And I'm not afraid to challenge people in their opinions, but they need to be able to. People need to be able to voice their opinions and defend them at the same time.
Yeah. Okay, I guess it's my turn. Okay, my question is, when was the last time you surprised yourself?
Oh, interesting.
Um, I guess this is like a time that I didn't plan to like. Oh, I do they mean like as a person, like
Yeah,
I
I think so.
interesting. Oh, I was like, I bought myself some cookies the other day, and I was
Oh no, not
surprised
like treat
myself.
yourself.
No, they mean like me as a person. I was like, this is a dumb
Yeah.
question. Interesting. When was the last time that I surprised myself? Honestly, it's doing this podcast, like,
Yeah.
and showing up. I am surprised that I've been able to show up the way that I have to do this because
Mhm.
when it comes to interpersonal relationships, like I have no problem being open and like talking with people, even if they're like strangers. I enjoy good conversations, but I was really hesitant to have open discourse on a
Mhm.
platform like this and not be in control of who's gets to listen to it. And there's not like
Mhm.
I can't gatekeep my thoughts the way that I've been able to before in the past. And
Mhm.
I've been surprised at how well I've been able to adjust to that and still feel like I'm not giving a version of me that isn't authentic to who I actually am. You know, like
Yeah.
it's definitely packaged in a way that is presentable to people, and I don't give off my entire life.
Mhm.
But I'm surprised that I've shown up in a way that allows me to still be real with people, you know,
Yeah.
and honestly, I didn't feel that way until I got feedback from people, and they were like, I felt like they're talking to an old friend, or they felt like they were talking to someone they knew, and it was just like, oh, this is crazy. Like,
Mhm.
I'm happy that I can I'm able to show up in that way. So moving on, this is reflection level. I just picked one question from it. I feel like it would just tie
Mhm.
the conversation well, so
Okay.
it's not shuffled. But what is a lesson that you will take away from our conversation? And this is like one that we both answer.
Yeah, do you want me to go first?
Hmm.
Okay, so the lesson I took away from this conversation is
Yes.
that there's certain people in your life that you don't talk to that often, but when you do, it's like you live with them. Like, I don't know. Every
Mm,
time you and I talk, it's always that time we sat in the lobby and Palm and talked for like 3 hours. That's what it feels
yeah.
like to me. So the lesson is, there's something to be said about interpersonal connection that's real, because
Mm,
the authenticity that gets along with that comes along with it is very deep. It's a very deep connection. So that's my reflections. That yeah, always encourage the people that you like to do the things that they like, because it just them, you know how it feels.
I agree. I want to say something. Oh, yes. I was just talking about this weekend, honestly. Literally yesterday, I was talking to my friend about friendship and different types of friendship and how we quantify and
Hmm.
qualify our friendships. And I was saying how, well, two things. One is like I'm really exhausted over the performance of friendship and
Oh
like
yeah.
just like I why do you like why do I care that people think that I'm friends with X person or Y person? Like I just
Hmm.
don't like the performance of friendship. Like there shouldn't
Hmm.
be for other people. But the more relevant thing that I touched on was that there are certain friendships that I have that sit outside of time,
Hmm.
and it's because I've met not like the core of that person, but a version of them that is like more stable
Hmm.
than how they're doing that day, or like I don't necessarily know how your day's been these past few weeks, but I when I talk to you, it's like, oh yeah, like I know Nick, you know, like I
Hmm.
know of him, like I know generally trajectory wise like how he's doing, you know, and I appreciate those
Yeah.
friendships more, especially becoming a young adult and being able to let life happen to me and not feel worried that like I'm gonna lose that friendship, you know, because when I enter it
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
in,
Yeah.
it's just kind of like catching up. So
Hmm.
I was just talking about the other day, but I guess a lesson that I will take away from my conversation, honestly, like this is even about you directly, but I think I need to do a better job at respecting people's journey in terms of like what drives them, but also what they want to support and what they want to be a part of, you know, because I
Hmm.
feel like sometimes I can write people off if they tell me that they support X thing or they encourage this kind of behavior, or I don't want to get too specific, but
No, I know what you mean, though.
specifically with politics, because I try to stay. I'm like, I try to be in like aware, but I also try to be aware of like my socio cultural location as like an immigrant and
Mhm.
like a international student. And so I try to
Yeah.
I mind my business with my eyes open, you know? And so
Yeah.
with that, I'm always renegotiating with myself, like what is my place with people who I meet who have certain
Mhm.
places that they're at, and like how do I respect them from that place? So it's not necessarily about you directly, but I think that people in my life that I know of, that had they
Yeah.
told me certain things, I'd be like, all right, well, talk to you never, you know, like
Yeah, nice knowing you.
yes. And back to this like
Yeah.
perception, or like what'll I hear from someone that makes me turn them off? It's those kinds of stuff. It's like, oh, I do
Mhm.
this, and I'm like, cool, I know what I know you now, you know, and I think I should stop
Mhm.
doing that, because I do that pretty often, where I'll figure out that someone shares the wrong post or from the wrong account, and I'm like, okay, I see what you know, I see what you believe now. I'm gonna
Yeah.
step back. But I do think I need to do a better job at like leaving room for people to prove me wrong, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. There's and that's such an important part about being a person with other people. It's like if we lived in a society where every time you did something wrong, there'd be no one around. I mean, it's just
Mm,
simple as that. Like it's unfortunately we're in a time an extremely divisive time, especially it's being exacerbated with social media. And you know that I don't have any social media, so
yes, famously.
I'm immune to the idea of it. Like, it's a moot point for me at this point that
Mhm.
like, when people tell me that so and so said this or they did this, it's like, listen, that you're a child if you think that this person is gonna be your example of them is denoted off of their social media. It's like you need to talk to them in person about it.
That is gonna tie up our conversation, our little game. Thank you, Nick, for playing.
Thank you
I
for
am
having me.
I'm keeping you around. We're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna do the tap out. It is time for the small business shout out this week. Actually, our conversation today with Nick, we were talking about what I would want to splurge on, and he guessed that I would be splurging on self-care items, basically. He was not wrong. I felt very red, very seen. And so this week we're talking about Olive and Dash Co. That's OLIVEDASHCO on Instagram. I will all be in the description. But they're a Black-owned wellness and self-care boutique, and they make handmade goods and different unique finds just for self-care and whatever you want to use it for. They have really cool products. We're on their website, and they have whipped body bombs, they have bath soaks, they have body oils, and it's Black-owned, women-owned. I am just living, and like Nick guessed, I don't need any motivation or any encouragement to spend a coin on some self-care items. And so, yes, please check them out. They also have a newsletter where they post blog posts and whatnot. So yeah, just support small businesses where you can, and I'll have the info in the description. Okay, we're back. It is time for the tap out. I asked Nick to bring me a tap out this week. Nick, what did you bring for me this week?
So, the tap out is going to be, I need to stop projecting my shortcomings as an individual onto the people that I wanna be in an intimate relationship with.
Oh, okay. We can go
You
there.
see okay,
I have been talking about projection all weekend, so you're actually right on time.
dude, it's a huge problem. It's a bad problem.
Do you wanna break that down for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have a buddy of mine, his name will not be mentioned, but he has a
Okay.
very hard time with females.
Okay.
And there's been it's like an ongoing list, and he names
Mm-hmm.
the qualities, he names the issues, he names this, and I gently pushed back on him, and I'm said, hey, unfortunately there's 6 girls like down the tubes that obviously didn't reciprocate the feelings. Maybe it's you. Maybe. No, and as a friend you're allowed to say that, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
In
Maybe it's
love.
you.
Yes.
He wholeheartedly disagreed with me, wholeheartedly. And that's when I thought to myself, I'm like, this guy is projecting some notion of an ideal relationship that these women
Mm.
obviously can't uphold. But at the same time, is it their problem to uphold it, or is it his ideal of the actual situation that he's not getting. But that whole reflection point, I brought it back to myself. You know how I am. Like, I'm not a big relationship guy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, and it's unfortunate, but because I enjoy people a lot, and
Mhm.
obviously a little too much because I can't commit to one.
Mm.
But the idea of and this is going back to projecting, like, I
Yes.
project my shortcomings, so, like, my
Mm.
insecurities of being in a relationship, I put them on other people. I'd be like,
Mm.
"Listen, if I do this, like, I don't text back, or I'm not faithful, or I don't care about them in this way, or I don't care about their dreams or goals or aspirations. They definitely don't care about mine."
Mm.
So I'm using it as a way to backdoor myself out of every relationship so I can
Interesting.
validate my own thought process and be, "Oh, yeah, they don't care about you because look how you are." But it's a negative feedback loop because maybe I'm actually not like that. Maybe I just need to
Mm.
work through some stuff and get, like, an actual partner who cares. But whatever the case is, I mean, you're a little more versed on it than I am. I'm just that's something I wanna try to stop
Mm.
ish.
Yeah, it sounds a little bit like a way of self-sabotage, you know?
Mhm,
And I feel like, not to like, I'm not your therapist, but it kind of feels like this need to like, I think part of why we project is a defense mechanism. You know, I think that we're trying to
mhm,
like protect something, you know? So
mhm.
do you think you know like what you're trying to protect, like
Oh,
about
yeah, I think it's
yourself?
my lifestyle for sure. Like,
Mm.
the way I operate, like, I'm very much infatuated with how I am and things, and my
Mm.
insatiable curiosity, um, the way I operate, the my day to day. It's like I'm intoxicated by it, and I really like it, and I've been doing it for years now. So any type of glimpse of that going away, I immediately put up the walls of, and that could obviously be facilitated with a nice healthy conversation. But
Mm.
I project that one too, and I project the idea that they're not emotionally mature enough to understand what I like in my life. You know what I mean?
Yes, Nick, this is like I'm happy for you because again, we don't talk, but like that much. But I feel like I definitely have noticed this in you a lot, and it's sad because I relate heavily, especially in
Mhm,
my relationships, like platonic relationships.
mhm.
It's so common, and it's like it's funnier to me because it's you, but it is really common. Like
Yeah.
I don't do tap outs often for other people, but also connecting to projection, like I really don't
Mhm,
like people, this is not even related, but I really don't like people who like will reach out to you with a very pointed and like specific message, and me having never asked about this or talked about this topic before, but they
mhm.
come as if like, I know you need help with this, so here you go, here's this helpful advice, and I'm like,
Oh, interesting.
this is projection because I've never told
Yeah.
you I struggle with this thing or that thing, and you just telling me like, and worse with Christians, honestly, because they'll be like, oh, I was praying for you, and I just want to let you know that it'll be okay. Like, you might be struggling with this, but it'll be fine soon. And I'm like, really? Because I've been having a really good day, and I don't remember
Yeah.
telling you that I was struggling with this thing, and so I think again, I'm not sure. I think for those people, they're trying to protect the connection they want to preserve with you. I think that's why they do it,
Mhm.
is they're trying to like overcompensate for like a relationship that
Yeah.
isn't producing that kind of discourse naturally, you know?
Mhm.
And I feel for these people. But I think back to this projection thing, I think it is just a mechanism of protecting our egos, protecting
Yeah.
like, and it's almost a bit of like scarcity, and a little bit of like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Um,
No, you're right. You're right.
have
You're right.
you
100%.
do you feel like you've made any efforts or like any, what's the right word, adjustments that have been more helpful for you in terms of like how to tap out of this, or are you just kind of stuck?
Unfortunately, I pretty much doubled down on my own behavior. Like, I think,
Interesting. Yes.
the type of content I absorb is predicated a lot on success and fulfillment of
Mm,
like financial business, like things like that. Like, to give, I guess, to your viewers, the best way to put it is like I'm very ambitious towards a certain area of my life.
yes.
And that's something that I don't. It's not a secret. Like, I think a lot of people, if they met me, they'd be like, "Yeah, this kid's kind of intense." Uh, but I've doubled down. For instance, there's a professor I follow. His name's Scott Galloway, and he he basically debunked the myth of work-life balance, and it kind of that when he said that, it like validated me. I was like, you know what, you're right, because it seriously, because it's like now there's another area where you don't have to put effort into relationships. Like there's another tool in your tool belt to help you dismantle that argument. Because like now you see what I mean. So
yeah.
I haven't made any adjustments. And unfortunately, as a guy, as you get older, you get more attractive to the opposite sex because you can acquire more resources, and that's something that's attractive. So I think it's just gonna get worse, unfortunately.
Interesting. I think, yeah, I'm actually gonna probably do an episode about all this because I think about projection a lot. Like I think about it because I feel it happen to me all the time. I don't know what it is about my life specifically, but I mentioned this last episode, but we talked about how in life we need like a mirror. We need, whether that's a person, whether that's a partner, whether that's your parents, like we need something to like reflect our thoughts and feelings off of. And I find I'm the type of person that like people are attracted to projecting off of me, and I don't know why. Like I do not like that. Like I'm a very relatable person. I'm very agreeable and open, and so I feel like people kind of use that, and naturally they don't even mean to, but I end up feeling a lot of projection. And like I said earlier, even, oh my gosh, this projection is everything, because even back to people back in the day, solely pouring into me based on like this future, that felt like projection a little bit. I didn't know what to call it then, but it felt a little bit like these people are like older and kind of like set in what their life's gonna look like, and so they spend so much energy telling me who I'm gonna be, and it didn't make sense to me because I was like, why is this so important to you? This is not your life, but and these are like not strangers, but like these aren't people who are like living in my house. These are people who are like have separate families, but they will go out of their way to tell me I'm going to be successful, And so I in a way, it's a little bit like, they feel like they're missing out on something, or they missed their chance. And so Alex is like, I'm going to give my thoughts, my energy to Alex because, and again, it sounds really good. It sounds really benevolent, but tied in that, it doesn't feel good when you kind of unpack it, Cool. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming on the podcast. I just dropped my whole deck of cards. This is your chance to plug anything you want to plug. You're not social media, so obviously there won't be any social media.
No, actually, I mean,
anything you want to say.
So one thing, I'm on another podcast called the Canceled Media Podcast, blah, 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 whatever. Cool. But I have this quote that I really like that I want to tell you.
Okay.
It's by Petrarch, which is he's an Italian philosopher from back in the day. And I like this quote a lot. It's a psychological quote, but we can unpack it after I say it. So first it goes, like our stomachs, our minds are hurt more often by overeating than by hunger. Okay. So basically saying that the more you put into your mind, obviously the more it's going to affect your well-being. Like overeating is going to be, it's going to hurt a lot more than hunger.
Interesting.
And I mean, I can't really speak to that because I've, obviously I've never really been like hungry, but it's an analogy that I really like. And I think it's the idea of less is more, doing less or doing less, being less, thinking less of yourself, thinking more of other people, like just pulling back on everything in your life and reevaluating a lot of things and trying to center and be minimal. Like my minimal attributes, the reason why I have them is because my mind is extremely busy. And the more outgoing in my external environment, the more it perpetuates a cycle of negative emotion in my mind. So I try to keep my surroundings as very austere as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in a spiritual sense, that kind of reminds me of this idea of like making room for stuff, like we have the ability to tell ourselves what this life is all about and where we're going to be and what we think about the world, how the world works. But there is a beauty in being able to make room for life to teach you something, and letting people in your life who are going to teach you how to be a better person. And I think it's a practice. I don't think it's like I think it's a value you can hold, but I like overeating and that's an action. That's like like something you have to choose
it's
to
pervasive.
do. Yeah,
it's pervasive. Absolutely. You choose consciously. You choose that consciously you choose that. So that's an element of stoicism, is choosing not to, rather than, I always say that, like, if you have the, there's two choices, either you do or you don't. But I like the idea of less is more, and then you can go from there. If you start scaling back, understanding that that's all these external fixations and vices are not going to give you what you want. Maybe to experience in them, so you understand it won't give you what you want, but people usually try to dig a little deeper and try to find their meaning through other things. But I like that quote a lot. I read it and I'm like, I ponder it and I'm like, yeah, you know what, that's kind of cool.
That's interesting. And that's why I love this podcast, because I really want to be a place where no matter where you're coming from or how you're figuring it out, like, there's something to be tapped into in that arena. So I appreciate you bringing that to the table.
No, of course.
Well, Nick, this has been
of course.
great. Thank you again for coming. I'll talk to you later. Thank you again to Nick for coming on the podcast. I really appreciated it. I definitely learned something new about him. Even apart from the triplets thing, I was like, what? Like, that was my genuine reaction, because I didn't. I have known Nick for a while. I have never known that about him. I've seen his brother and sister, like, in pictures. Never, ever, ever did I know that he was a triplet. So that was like, it blew my mind. But I had to keep my cool. But apart from that, I genuinely I had a really good time. I learned a lot about him, and I'm pretty sure vice versa too. So again, that was We're Not Really Strangers. It's available online and in Target as well. I'm gonna link the game in the description for sure. Also, we have an update on the newsletter. I'm working on the newsletter if you didn't know. Just some way to keep up with me, and also I want to provide some kind of additive exclusive content you can tap into as well on the side. And so be on the lookout for that sometime in May, I promise. Well, let me not say that. I'm looking forward to May being the month in which I release the newsletter. So let's just say I'm hoping for May. I'm strongly hoping for May for it to happen. I can't promise you that, but I can say that I hope it'll be in May. And so hopefully in May, I'll be releasing the newsletter. It'll be free to subscribe, and then you'll get access at least twice a month to, no more than twice a month, honestly, to some exclusive content I want to produce for you guys. So yes, be on the lookout for that. In the meantime, you can follow me on social media at JustAlexToday on Instagram and Twitter. If you have a question for the inbox, that's advice questions, personal questions, literally anything about anything, you can email heartofshema@gmail.com, or you can DM me. That's either way is fine. Please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts, 5 stars. Please write a review. It helps a lot. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Anchor, all the places. So yeah, I mean, that's the show. So have a good week.